In today's video, I talked to the returning Barry Aldridge. He was a guest in Series 1 which took place in 2020 during the COVID lockdown. We catch up on what has happened since we last spoke, what has changed, and what Barry has been up to since. Hi guys, and welcome to episode 4 of the Autism Connection Series 6, and today on the show guys we are bringing back a guest from Series 1. We have a special guest today and it is Barry Aldridge. So Barry, thank you for coming back on. It's hard to believe all those years ago during the pandemic was the first series of the Autism Connections. You was on the first series of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm bringing someone back from each series, and we already know from the last episode that we filmed all those years ago what your connection to autism is. So, the first question I'm asking people is, from when you first came on to now, what has changed for you? What do you think has changed in terms of autism, neurodiversity? But more importantly, what has changed for you?
Well, yeah. Thank you very much, though, Max, for allowing me onto your thing. And it has been like a crazy 5 years because it was during the pandemic where COVID-19 was about, and we were all uncertain about what was actually going on with that. And I felt like we had a good time though 5 years ago, and it was a great little interview. We got to know each other a little bit then, and that was actually really good. But yeah, things have kind of like got into emotion a little bit because for me it's been kind of like sort of the same for me, but also at the same time I've been more about autism acceptance rather than awareness. I can understand why people want to raise awareness still if you're just starting, but I've raised awareness for such a long time that I felt like, yeah, it's time for the acceptance part, which happened during the 2020 special thanks to the National Autistic Society, and maybe I think a couple of other autistic charities or organizations that have done that as well. For me, over the 5 years, again, I like I said, nothing much has changed really. I think things have been going pretty well. Things have changed a bit, and recently I finished off a share plan thing, which I did get a lot of money back from, which was actually really good because I started it though 5 years ago, and I got the money there, so I was able to get a PS5 Pro from that. Yeah, more of a personal goal, had to get a disc drive in that, but hey, that's for me anyway, personally speaking. I think autism has kind of like goes into different directions because I think I did mention in the last interview about how I got my diagnosis was back in the 80s when autism wasn't really well known. It was trying to get into the mainstream, but it was like it's like a new music genre just trying to get into the club or something like that, trying to get into the mainstream back in the 80s. It was in 87, and it took quite a while. It took until when about probably the late 2000s and 2010 when it really got the rocket was launched though for autism, no question about it. There's always going to be like one or two steps forward, for certain things, and then they have to step back because of something else is important within the autistic thing. There's also stories about what happened with the detention centers, all these different people, how they're treating autistic people at these centers, and that's still kind of like the same, sadly. But I know there's been progress there as well. Education is recognizing it, and I've had friends who gotten diagnoses a lot more easier, even though the waiting times is a little bit longer. My mom told me a story again that reminded me about when I got my diagnosis. I went to a specialist who was one of the best in the country, Simon Baron Cohen. And yeah, there's a lot of different things that are going on. Like there are certain things within autism that have stepped forward, but also stepped back. And I think it's still important to highlight it. I'm glad though that girls getting getting the diagnosis. I think that's important because there was a bit of a thing that were only boys, which I knew it wasn't true. Hell, I went to an autistic school back in the 80s and 90s, which had autistic girls as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of things about that. I feel like it's just the mainstream trying to build a story to try and say, hey, pick one side off the other. That's why I don't fully buy into it. And yeah, I feel like I've chatted enough now. So, yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there for me, though, mate. So, thank you very much for that question. If there was anything I missed there, I'll be glad though to rephrase that again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you make some really good points, and there's a lot of stigma, as you said, back then. That still there's some people now that still believe in that sort of that mindset. You know, people still think, for instance, girls might not be able to be autistic, or you know, there's some people even think, you know, there's no such thing as autism. You know, you're just naughty, and all this sort of stigma.
Mm.
Um, do you think we still got, as you said, it's improved massively, but do you think we still got a way to go to breaking some of that stigma? And what do you think the sort of best way to break those stigmas is?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I mean, it's quite a hard one because I think when it was out there during the 80s, I think they were trying to move things forward in, say, for example, to try and get autism out there. And then over the years, they were trying to push a story in the mainstream where it pushed certain things back a little bit. And then in the 2010s, when they mentioned about, again, we were talking about autistic girls, they moved that step forward. And then I feel like another thing about getting the proper autism diagnosis, I feel that's gone back because of the waiting times and that. It's all about the pendulum swinging or the seesaw. It's about that. Like it's very, very tricky. You want to get the right balance, but I feel like they're not getting the right balance completely. Like I say, they could be one or two steps forward on one thing, and then the other thing they could be like two or three steps back on the other. So, but it's an interchange in like the seesaw or the pendulum, really, at the end of the day.
No, I think you're spot on, and I think at times it's been interesting because some of the work that I do as well is raising the awareness for autistic individuals. And what I've sort of picked up on a lot is how language has become so important. And if you get that bit of language wrong, you know, in terms of maybe saying someone has autism rather than is autistic, or if you say, you know, a pet peeve of mine is always when people say, "Oh, everyone's a little bit autistic," because I just think no, but
No,
uh,
definitely not. I agree. Mm.
you know, so I suppose they are pet peeves of mine, and I do hate when people use the language incorrectly. But I suppose my question is to you. What's your thoughts on people that might use language incorrectly but are genuinely trying to understand and accept neurodiversity? Because I done a interview the other day and actually found out, you know, again, forever learning myself, that there's a lot of neurotypical people out there that want to understand neurodiversity, but they feel scared to in case they get a bit of language wrong. And my approach has always been, yes, language is important, but I'm not going to have a go at someone because they use it incorrectly. I'd rather have someone try and understand the condition and the way that Max is or the way that Barry is, rather than not ask those questions. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Now, that is an interesting thing because I think what also could be an issue, again, I'm going to go back to the mainstream media where they pick out certain things. Well, I feel like there are some people they talk to in the media, especially, about certain newspapers. You'll probably get where I'm going with it. And I think we discussed this one time kind of privately where one newspaper thought, yeah, there was a cure for autism. And the thing is, I think people want to know about it, but they don't realize that there may be newspapers or TV stations, online series, podcasts who want to highlight this, but they may have their own agenda to it, or they generally want to know, but they feel like this may be the answer where maybe they don't really, to be quite honest with you. I think the average Joe, I will say this, no, that's a bit unfair to me. The neurotypical is the word that we should say. Sorry. So I'm being a bit bad here. I think most of them really want to understand it. I will be honest. I think you're absolutely right. It is difficult because of the language, because of nowadays you look at comedy though, and how you can't do certain jokes nowadays. Like there are certain things in that, and there's certain language I could say. there is one word that begins with R and ends in D, which I will admit I'm actually really glad personally myself. I was never ever a fan of the word personally myself, even if they use it in a certain context or something like that. And what it is as well is when people are trying to teach people about the language, it's also, yeah, you got to be careful about how you teach it as well. It's like, um, I don't like certain films or TV programs or something like that that try and force a message, even if they say, even if I agree with the message 100%. I've seen that with a lot of shows, and that even if I feel like, hey, you know what, they got the message right, but I feel like, oh, you're not focused on the story, or you're forcing it down the throat or something like that. It's a very, very difficult thing though, really, at the end of the day. For me, just trying to think about the right words here. I think it's just down to how you teach it as well, and how you're, and also the mood you're in as well. And also, you can't have people who don't know much about it. I mean, if they're a family member and that and want more understanding, they want to have a better thing. Again, I know we had another private chat about this, about celebrity involvement with autism, especially now. Here's the thing with Paddy McGuinness and his wife. I think that they do have a kid that's autistic, and I think that's great in that, and they want to raise awareness. But the other thing as well is I know we had another private chat about it, that too much celebrity involvement could actually leave the average person out of it as well. So there is a lot to digest. Again, it's a very, very complex issue. It's like with any other sort of condition, any of the neurodiversity things in there and that. And at the end of the day as well, there are people arguing, should we use Asperger's syndrome, which, I'm never a fan of the term of that myself as well, but I do understand why some people might still want to use it. But it's a very, very complex question. But yeah, I think it's just down to language, the mood you're in, if you're very, very calm, if you actually understand the subject matter. There's a load of other things. And I'm trying to think of fifth thing. And don't be a or force things down people's throats. That is probably my five things about that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you come from it in a term of I'm telling you, and you go into
Mm.
anything with that sort of stance of you're wrong and I'm right, it will alienate people and it will put people's back up. Which I try not to do. I try and go in and have a conversation. If someone was just ignorant and just said, well, no, Max, I don't believe in any of your conditions, you're just a naughty brat, then I might take a bit of umbrage to that rather than say,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Because that is someone who's just being completely rude and ignorant about the the lived experience that someone has gone through with those conditions. Um, but my mum often gets language wrong. So, for instance, my mum will say, "Yeah, but Max, you think of it like that, but a normal person." And my mum immediately goes, "Oh no, no, that's not what I meant." But I know what my mum is trying to say, and therefore I'm not going to go after my mum because she's got a bit of language wrong. I get what she's trying to explain to me. What she's actually trying to say is someone without your condition. But sometimes as people, it's too wordy, and we just try and shorten things, and then it comes out completely wrong, which is honestly what my mum does. Because
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. It's like I watch comedies where they do these misunderstanding situations where they want to say one thing, but it actually means something else. It's like one of those romantic situational comedy situations. So yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. So yeah.
during COVID, what I said as well was COVID was probably a time, all those years ago when I first interviewed you, it was probably a time where it was probably the most kind of time that a neurotypical person may understand what it might be like to be autistic. Not fully, but in regards to, their whole routine was changed overnight. People wanted to socialize, but they didn't know how to.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all this uncertainty, all this unknowing, not knowing, when it was going to be okay to start doing their routine again. Um, do you think people went away from COVID and learned from it, or do you think that the world very quickly got back to they sort of time is a great healer, all of that stuff. So do you think people just very quickly got back to the norm, whatever that is?
Oh, that's a good one. This is something I actually have thought about a bit. I think it's more about the norm because I think they just want to forget about COVID in general because they felt like it was the end of the world, which that part I totally get. There may be another thing I might say that may be a little bit controversial to people, but I feel like some aspects of society, not all society, have gone a bit downhill in terms of I feel like they're a bit more focused on money, politics, job, and that, which I get to a point, but I think they focus on it a little bit too much. Where I feel like it's because of what's happened, like with COVID, the cost of living, the wars, now with the tariffs that are going on, yet that's just recent news and all that sort of stuff. And I get that to a point, but I'm like, guys, we're meant to have fun here and that, and as well, and also, um, try and build a bit of a better understanding with each other. Some things have, like I said in an earlier question that you asked me, some things have improved, but then there's a couple of things that have gone step backwards again. But I think I can understand the mindset, but I think at the same time, it's like the ones who complain about people breaking the rules or something like that, they're the ones that I feel like they've gone, yeah, not so nicey once we got back to normal or something like that, because they just want things to get back to normal and all that sort of stuff, which I can understand, but I feel like some people are a bit contradictory as well. So, but on the positive aspect, I think it has made people a bit more mindful about what could actually happen and understand about certain routines and that. So, like I say, it goes both ways.
That sort of pendulum, as you said, there's so
Mm.
many things, as you said, that have got better, but at the same time have sort of swung the other way. Do you sort of think we had an opportunity there for a sort of, especially during COVID, in terms of how employment works, in terms of education works? Do you think we had a good time in that period of maybe, I know they were facing a global pandemic, and I know that was the priority, but do you think they also may have missed an opportunity there to make employment better, to make education better? Was there ever a better time to look at the education system and sort of go, right, this does need to be looked at because we've got people leaving schools knowing how many wives Henry VIII had, but they don't know how to read a bank statement or they don't know how to, write a resume. So do you think there was opportunity there that there could have been absolute, reframing of these infrastructures to make them better? And do you think it was missed?
I think it was actually kind of missed because I think they were more focused on the crisis aspect than to try and improve things in a way. Because here's the thing about it that some people don't realize when someone says there's something really bad, they don't try and offer a solution to the whole thing. And I think that's what it is. They just want to talk about the problem rather than think, okay, what could be the alternative solution? And then when someone challenges them to it, I've seen some journalists who do a good job of trying to challenge those people, and yet they can't come up with an answer for the solution. And so I think it was a bit missed there as well. And also, trying to think off the top of my head, I was thinking about this when you was asking me the question of, I feel like that there has been some things that, like you say, they have missed out on certain things overall. And I really can't think off the top of my head, but I think, yeah, I think they were even more focused on the pandemic, or B, like they were trying to think how could they survive during this particular thing, and I think they thought about survival was more importantly in that rather than how to improve it because people had no idea about the situation. But I think they were more focused on trying to keep the general public happy. And yet it does come with some costs. And I think people don't realize about the costs. And again, I feel like people don't play the long game. They play more the short game, which I totally get. But that's what happens though when you play the short game. You sometimes have to play the long game. You have to think about that. yeah, not every long game plan's going to work, but well, at least give it a try. That's my view.
I mean, yeah, and obviously they've done so much. I mean, hey, people have their views on it. The pandemic, obviously, they've done a lot of work getting the vaccine out, making sure that people weren't continuing to die from the 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 disease. And that probably was the priority, in order to actually have a world to improve in the first place, right? Because, what's the point of trying to improve something that possibly wouldn't exist if you don't? Uh,
Yeah.
in your sort of view, where do you think the massive failings are now in neurodiversity? Whether that's from a financial point of view, whether or you think that's from employment or the mental institute, the Mental Health Act, which we know, is currently getting looked at because it still includes, autistic people being detained, which is terrible and awful. So for you, where do you think the massive pitfalls are now versus then? I mean, we know what you thought those years ago. So where do you think the pitfalls are now?
Um, it's a really good question. I think what it comes down to is, I think it's people just only knowing the basic knowledge, which is fine. I think there is. I think if they know the basic knowledge, I think that's basically it. And it's just, if people are curious about it, they have to understand. Yeah, there's a lot behind it. Like it's not. They are grouped together with, say, like ADHD, Down syndrome, all that sort of stuff. While I think, they want to put them all into a sort of a group or something, I think that can be a little bit of a problem there. So, financially, I'm not so sure because I think, again, like I say, I think people are too focused on the money aspect. Although, if the money aspect is important to try and find something, yeah. Also, with people trying to talk about cures all the time, again, going back to mainstream outlets who are trying to promote that sort of story, and then you find out Bubkus or something like that. I think it's Bubkus. I mean, I remember we had a private chat though recently where we talked about it, and then we and then after that private chat, I looked at it and I went, "Oh, that's a bit Bubkus and that." So another thing as well, I think it's just it needs to be looked at a little bit differently because there are some people who still think of it as disease and it's not. And again, it's just down to the language barrier. There are people that generally want to know, but the problem is it's about how words are with different cultures as well. Like one culture might think of red as a good color, and then another culture is think of it as a bad color. It's all about how the cultures are as well, like different things. Like you American English has different ways of saying color, flavor, different type of words, and we say it in a different way as well. That's another thing as well. It's about trying to find a world understanding, but also at the same time, there are countries in that don't want to lose that original identity, and so I think that they don't realize that if they want a bit more of an understanding, they have to go outside of the box, as they would say, or Pandora's box. There's a lot to think about, though. Really, I feel like that while there are politicians out who are trying, but I feel like they're just doing the basic. And I think mainly for mainstream, that's enough. But for some people in the autistic community, they want more to it than that. So it's very, very hard though to say though. Really, I think there's a lot of different things you've got to look at. Again, also some people might misunderstand the phrasing of questions, answers, and see it in a different way though. Really, and it's quite a lot to deep there. But I think also at the same time, there is some good benefits out of it where, yeah, you know what? I'm actually a guy that's gotten out there that people know about it actually exists in that. I mean, when I got my diagnosis, I was living in London. And then when I moved out of London and moved down to the South Coast, I realized about how the treatment of autistic people isn't the best. But, so I got very, very lucky with mine. And I just wish that everyone else had the same diagnosis as well. So it's a lot to say, though, mate. It's a lot. And it's a very, very big thing. It's something that needs a bit more suggestion and time, and also patience, understanding, not rushing about. I feel like the world's gone a bit too more rushy though nowadays. And even in a TV program, while it can be good in one way, it's like no, no, no. And even in films, any sort of media. So yeah, that's my summing up. And there is a lot more I could say, but I thought I'll leave it there because I don't want to ramble too much.
No, no, that's again, I think you make really good points, especially when you compare the American English language versus the English language. There are certain TV shows that when they air in the UK, the the language that the Americans have put in has to be adopted because there are certain words here that are offensive, that aren't considered offensive in America. So, and it has completely different meanings. So, I think you raise a good point. I mean, obviously, last time we spoke as well, Barry, you was working on, I think you were doing your YouTube, you was working on your games. So, how has all that gone, and what is sort of next for you?
Oh, good question. Well, with YouTube, it was a topsy-turvy thing where I just recently come back to doing YouTube videos over the last few months because my channel got hacked back in 2022. And, I took a bit of a retirement, but then I thought, I'll do it more for the fun side of it. And I'm actually glad to do that. So I just do vlogs now and then and that. I'm just a lot more happier just doing that whenever I want to, though, really, at the end of the day. And the video games, the one I did the voiceover for, I was really, really glad about it. It got a physical copy on PS4 with a company. And the one that I produced, it's come out on all systems apart from my beloved PlayStation, unfortunately. But it's gonna happen though, really. That's the price though with indie video game making or in the independent sort of thing. But you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm just glad though to have done that. And it was a good experience in that. I haven't done any more since, but I'm actually kind of glad that I still did them at the end of the day. So I'm glad though you brought that up. So thank you for asking though, Max.
No, pleasure, and I'm glad you had. I'm glad that you had fun doing it, but also I can really relate to the YouTube stuff. You know, I haven't retired from YouTube. I would say I'm probably definitely considered a part-time YouTuber nowadays. But
Mm,
it's it's something I've done since 2008. So, it's took a lot of sort of years
yeah.
doing it constantly to finally get to the point where I don't know, your responsibilities and everything else changes as you get older, and it's a lot harder to do. Which I suppose leads me on to my last question. Obviously, all those years ago, we spoke in series one. Let's just say, for instance, we done another video in, we're celebrating series six of the Autism Connections, 5 years. So, you'd be looking at series 10, series 11, so,
Hmm.
if we was to make a video in the next 5 years, what would you have hoped that has changed for autism, neurodiversity, and yourself, the next time we make a video?
Yeah. It's a good question though. The last 5 years have been kind of interesting. I knew a lot of things would be the same, and I was hoping for certain things to change. I mean, during that period, I know we discussed this privately as well that we lost someone in the autistic community, sadly. He was a good bloke, and I did a couple of collab videos with them, and I was really, really proud of it. And it made me feel like bringing awareness and also more acceptance to it. I would like there to be a bit more acceptance to it, to a point where I think maybe within the next couple of years, I think it will be really fully accepted. I hope, but I don't think not 100%. But I think the awareness part. So I think that's still important. Um, one thing is try and stay alive. That's the thing. So I could join you back
Good
for
one.
Series 11. Yeah, yeah. Join you for Series 11 because I remember years ago I read this article, which I believe is a little bit bugged because they gave the average age of an autistic person passing away. And when that article came out, I was exactly the same age at that point. I was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. And, but luckily I'm still hearing that. Um, Other than that, though, really, I do realize there's going to be one or two of these things that move forward now. might take a bit of a back turn in 5 years' time, or even in a year's time. And then I think there's that pendulum shift again, though, I think, in my view. But I'm hoping, yeah, the pendulum swings just kind of slow down rather than fasten a lot.
Yeah.
And I like I say, I I would like there to still be celebrity endorsement, but not so much. And also listen to the average person or the average neurotypical and average autistic or ASD autistic person on the views and that. I mean, there have been some studies recently from the National Autistic Society about language, loneliness, and all that sort of stuff. And again, with work and well, it always comes out in the year when it comes to World Autism Awareness Month, week, day, or even acceptance, which that's what I'm doing. And I would say some things change, some things stay the same. So yeah, I think it's gonna be another pendulum swing, in my view, in 5 years' time when we get to Series 11, if we get to Series 11.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
And I know privately we've said as well that one of the things you'd love to see better is that you know, less obviously autistic people being detained in, mental health facilities.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully we get there with all of that. But I just wanted to thank you, Barry, for coming back on. Your insight and your knowledge is so valuable. And again, just thank you for your time and coming back on.
Pleasure. I mean, I do whatever the best I can for everybody. Yeah, I'm not always going to get it right. I'm not always going to get it wrong, but I do my best whatever I can. And again, even though the average person, who ain't autistic may want to understand things, get things wrong. Even we get things wrong though too when it comes to normal stuff though, guys. So it does go both ways. Just what I just mentioned as well. I'm not going to be one of those ones that's going to lecture those unless they want to be taught. If they want to be taught, then cool. That's what it is though, really, at the end of the day. So yeah, thank you.